G'day, g'day. Wherever you are in this multiverse, welcome to Mastering Music, Mastering Life. My very first edition for 2020. It's so good to be back after taking a bit of a break, an extended hiatus from the podcast to sit and think and be and work out what the hell I was going to do with this podcast. I always knew I was going to keep doing it, but every now and again you need to sit and do a bit of a self-audit and work out where you're going and trim the fat and do all those kind of maintenance things. So I'm back, everyone. So it's beautiful to be back, and with thanks to our good friends at Amiga MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, George Soteropoulos, my coach over there. Thank you once again for sponsoring the podcast, my man. Beautiful to have you on board for 2020, and I'm so delighted to have a master engineer who is one of the finest on the planet. He's got an incredible track record. He's been there. He's worked with the very best. I had the pleasure of meeting him for the first time. I think it was 1995, where he didn't know me from a bar of soap, but he still gave me the time of day and gave me some great pearls of wisdom. And to this day, I'm so pleased to say that I know this gentleman, Scott Hull from Masterdisk, New York. Thank you very much for joining us.
Hey, very welcome. Thanks for the invite. Happy to come on the show.
Oh man, it's been a very long time since we've spoken. I know we've interacted kind of indirectly through the forums, but it's been a long time, man. I remember the first time I met you when it was in Hell's Kitchen, and it was the very first time that I saw the sovereigns, the Duntech sovereigns, which we can see in the background in your room right now.
Yeah.
And you were saying before that they were actually that's exactly the same pair that I laid eyes on back then.
Yes. Yeah. They've been my ears, most of the years of my professional career. We were using them in 93, and I routinely say to people that, I only know what I'm listening to when I'm playing those speakers, because everything else is sort of a guess.
Yeah, I think it's interesting how I think every engineer has the thing that they like. It's a bit like now. I think I'm feeding back through you over there, Scott. I can hear myself feeding back, so maybe can you?
I'm here. It's clear on this end, but
okay. I was just hearing a bit of myself feeding back, but it's all good. It's all good. So no, I think again, look, every engineer has their own thing that they like and what they're used to and what they've been working with over many years. And but I like yourself, man. I had the opportunity to listen to lots of different types of speakers, and I'm certainly not being negative towards anything else out there. But I think to my ear and in the rooms I've worked with, I don't have sovereigns. I've got some regents, so they're sort of a one tier down from the sovereigns. But like you, my man, I just find that when I listen to them, there wasn't in fact, not a very long learning curve at all with them, and I find them extremely reliable. And I find that when the translation I get from them is phenomenal. But I guess it's a bit like prescription lenses, like some people have 20/20. If you and I swap glasses, we'd probably be going.
We'd both be running into walls.
Exactly. I remember the first time I saw them, Doug Levine, who owned the business back then. I think jokingly, first of all, said, "Well, they're Australian," which they are. Different ownership these days. But he did joke saying that the shipping costs more than the actual speakers, and I'm not surprised.
I kind of suspect that's the case. They're pretty damn heavy, and they're as big as me. They're 6 feet tall.
Yeah, I've got a pair lined up at the moment that I'll be getting for another room for the future. But I found the only way to get these things moved properly and safely was with piano movers. Just got some piano movers in, and they
If you're not going a long distance, I've actually successfully moved a pair in an old school Suburban. They go in on the back and aren't too bad. I mean, a pickup truck would be a little too rough, but with the enclosure of the Suburban, I was able to get a pair down from Massachusetts without breaking the bank and without hurting the speakers.
Yeah. So tell us about the current, because obviously you you went to Masterdisk. You managed the facilities. I remember back in the day, you ran the place. So just take us through what happened from Hell's Kitchen, man, and to the current day. So just take us through that.
Yeah, quite a bit went on, but the short story is things were going pretty good at Masterdisk. Bob Ludwig had left Masterdisk in '93 and opened up a room there, which I had been assisting Bob for most of 10 years to that point. And so with a little bit of internal wrangling, I was eventually given that room and promoted to chief engineer. And even though I wasn't senior amongst the other guys there, I was the information guy. I was the guy that knew kind of the new systems that were going on, and I was also the in-house computer guy for computer setups, for Sonic Solution setups, for Mac setups, PC setups, the whole bit. I think a few changes came along, and it just stopped being the place where I could see myself growing. Kind of felt like I had gotten to the top of whatever was going on at that point. And it was a funny point in my career. I thought it was going to be a real, downward progression from there. But I had never stepped outside of Masterdisk and found out what value I had to anybody else in the world. And so as soon as I started doing interviews and talking to people, I realized there were a lot of options. Picked up on a place that was just a little further north. It was at the Lincoln Center called Classic Sound. And it was there for, which is the two-room mastering place. They did other pro audio work, but it's a good group of people, really high quality, really everything they did was super high quality. And once I realized that I could go elsewhere and get the situation improved, as soon as I came up against the hurdle with them, I started asking around, and before I knew it, there was another offer on the table. And so then I went over to Hit Factory for a few years. The Hit Factory mastering was at the 54th Street, and it was a good idea when it started, but then the owners of the Hit Factory were having trouble. Not so much financially, but within the family, just familiar problems and business issues and things. And that started to unravel my relationship with the guy who brought me in, Troy Germano there. And he and I were still close, but he had a falling out with his family. And so that kind of spiraled downward, and they eventually closed up the studios and sold the building. I did a short stint downtown as a sort of a in between, and then came back up into Midtown and opened my own place, Scott Hall Mastering, right outside of Times Square. And each one of those locations was just kind of like another bump up in quality of my customer service, quality of the work I was doing, and hopefully the quality of the clients. It's a funny time though, as the business was changing pretty dramatically. And then, an opportunity came. The Scott Hall Mastering thing was going pretty well. I was pretty satisfied there. A couple other engineers came to work with me, and so we opened up a couple other smaller rooms. Dave McNair came on board. Joe Yanis came back from the Hit Factory. He was there with me, and at the time, Randy Merrill, who's now a superstar at Sterling. He was my assistant there at the time. So I had gotten fortunate that I found some really great people, and so it was a good crew. And I just got to thinking that maybe I was thinking a little too. My head got a little too big, but I was thinking I could bring that operation back over to Masterdisk and kind of upscale and upgrade what was going on at Masterdisk, and maybe launch the whole thing into another big multi-room facility. The build out at Masterdisk was still there on 45th Street, and so that's ultimately what I did. Doug, who you mentioned, decided he was kind of wanted to get out of the daily responsibility of the studio, and seemed like a pretty good fit, but the timing turned out to be awful. I took over that business in June of 2008, which, if anybody had any money invested, knows exactly when that time was. That was, you take that short little roller coaster ride up to the top, and when you hear the brake release, that little click, and everything gets quiet for a moment. That was right when I took the keys to Masterdisk, and everybody started screaming as we were headed downhill after that.
Well, I think a lot of people, I certainly thought it was very courageous. Some people maybe thought you were mad, but no, kudos for anyone who will, who'll put their balls on the line and give things a go, man, because the timing wasn't the best, and I'm sure it wasn't planned on your end, but nonetheless, you persevered and you went through it. So I got to hand it to you, man, that you would persevere, and especially with the way the industry was going and so many studios were shutting down and people were, apart from the GFC, just a lot of people were not getting their leases renewed, and more people downsizing and working from home. It was just all the rats had just jumped ship, and you just played a lone hand, and good on you, mate. And obviously it's paid off in spades for you.
Well, yeah, it was. I tell people I went to music school, not to business school, so I had to learn all of those mistakes kind of on one at a time in the most painful way possible. But I got like 3 or 4 years of practice with running my own business, Scott Hole Mastering, and then so I took those ideas over. But what I'd learned through reading and taking some management and CEO kind of a course of study kind of things, is that it really is a different thing to pilot a big ship. It's not like you can run do everything the same way that you do in a small boat. You can't just jump into a big ship and do everything the same way, because now you got not only more moving parts, but you got so many more people that you have to interact with and have to keep motivated. I think the analogy to the ship there works perfectly, because on a small sailboat, you can reach all the ropes and the rudder and can fend the boat off the dock and do everything all yourself. Even if you had 5 people on the boat, you could still do it all yourself. In the big boat or the big ship, you can't even turn the engines on without 5 people's help. So it really, the analogy is kind of, and it wasn't that huge, but to make it sort of make financial sense, I brought a lot of other people on board as extra engineers and junior engineers. We started a whole independent Masterdisk indie program out of that, and we really grew a lot of new talent in that situation. We had 4 senior engineers, and we had about 15 at one point junior engineers, all sort of in support and sort of in competition with the senior engineers. It was not everybody was super stoked at me doing that, because it kind of lit a fire under a couple of the older guys that were getting pretty complacent. But we had these younger guys that were ready to go and that had relationships and were tired of being told, well, why can't I master? And so we gave them some opportunities, and some of them really turned it into something of could name a few names, but you can find those folks out in the history of our place. But it's
well, there's one guy. There's one guy that, sorry to cut, but there's one guy that you mentioned, Dave McNair, who's a very dear personal friend of mine, and
sure.
And he's a great example of that. And I love that philosophy, Scott. The fact that you use the place as I am here on a smaller scale, but nonetheless similar model of using the studio to cultivate and find new talented people. Young guys who are hungry, they're fresh, they're keen, because I can see how it can be easy for someone who's established to sort of cruise along, and that's fine for some people. I'm generally not one who really wants to cruise. Personally, I find myself in the position where I still love doing mastering, but I also believe that it's been a good run, and I'd like to pass the baton on to some young guys and get some young talent in here and develop them as engineers and people, be here playing a role, still mastering and doing things I want to do, but
Sure.
giving them the space and allowing them to become the future and become the draw cards and top billing engineers in the facility. And so I love that model, and I appreciate that you've done that on a bigger scale. And so what was that? I mean, for me, I came to that more because it was a way of looking as to how I could create more space for mentoring and speaking and that. Was that just a more business decision for you at the time? Just as a way to kind of help bring more income stream into the building, because the overhead over there obviously is, way higher than what I'd be paying over here.
Well, that was mostly geared to the fact that I couldn't sort of scale up, by adding another room. The option I had was to more than double the size of my business with one signature. And so it was, and I couldn't even really, because I had a lease at the existing space I was in, I couldn't really even divest myself of the 3 or 4 rooms that I had in the Times Square location. So for the first 2 years there, I had both operations going. So I added the 4 rooms at Masterdisk 2, the 4 or 5 rooms at the smaller rooms at my other location. And diverting my time away from my own mastering career was actually ended up being a big mistake. I didn't have a management structure or people around me. I was, like I said, I was doing, I was running around putting out all the fires myself and doing everything. And it was a routine that I didn't enjoy very much, but it was a routine that I didn't get to start my own mastering until about 7 o'clock at night. It was the whole day from about 9:30 in the morning till, through lunch, breakfast meetings, and then lunch meetings and staff meeting, and then checking in with people, running across the 3 or 4 blocks to the other location and putting out some sort of fire over there and checking in with those people, and then running back. And finally everybody else went home and I could start my mastering work at 7 o'clock. And so it wasn't a surprise at all to find that my personal numbers were going down. I just wasn't as available, and I wasn't able to put the time in that it would take to keep clients happy and keep clients coming back. So but I had made that bet. I was already in this thing, and the only solutions I could come up with for solving it were to add more people. It was knowing a little bit more what I know now, and learned along the way. Maximizing my time and plugging a couple of people in that could effectively run and co-manage would have been a really good move. And I was looking for those people. They just weren't weren't really. I wasn't finding the right fits. I was trying.
Yeah, no, and imagine. I think that's the thing, and there's a lot of people that go to audio school and they want to get their foot in the door, and so I'm curious to know, is you, as an owner and operator of a mastering facility, I mean, I know in this day and age, any young audio school graduates aren't necessarily going to be able to land into a big studio because there just aren't that many around or positions available. But when it comes to anyone who wants to perhaps intern, come in, watch, learn the ropes, just be guided or mentored by you, what are the qualities that you look for when someone does approach you? With respect to just whether it's just to come in for the afternoon or to perhaps have a more lofty ambition of maybe being mentored or interned, by you. So what are the things that you look for, and what are the things that you find sort of get under your skin, or the things, the things that kids, because we can learn a lot by how to do things, but I think we also can learn a lot by how not to do things. So even to hear,
Sure.
So what are those things that you look for, and what are the things that you find straight away like they're no-go zones, and you'd recommend, okay, kids, just don't do this no matter what?
Well, I got an interesting bit on this. Moving the studio outside of New York, which I did about a little over just 5 years ago now. I'm in a commercial building, but I'm in a more I'm about an hour outside of Central Manhattan. We're on a commuter line, so we still can get our clients can come in and out pretty easily because we're on a commuter train line. But what I was finding up here was that I didn't have quite the pool of audio graduates to go through, because in Manhattan, I actually had one point where we had, for 2-3 years when I had the big staff, we had 3 interns twice a year. So we'd have 6 interns a year. And I even, one of my interns was a little older, but was taking on, kind of had a career change in his 20s, and so he became the my king of the interns, and so he was the supervisor of the interns to kind of pass on the knowledge and let me know how they were doing, because I couldn't manage everything else I just described, and 3 interns. It was just nuts.
Yeah.
Just keeping up with their attendance was a full-time job.
Yeah.
So when I got up here, and the pool was smaller, I really started to think about what attributes I could find in common between my 4 assistants who had started as interns, but had gone on to be really successful mastering engineers. We got Joe Lambert, who's mastering pro in New Jersey, Nathan James, who's got his own place in Phoenix, Alex the Turk, who's works out of a place in Brooklyn, the Bunker, and Randy Merrill, who I'd mentioned before, who's now at Sterling. Those are my 4 previous, really good assistants that had stuck around, and I take quite a bit of pride in that. I mean, they're not only that they get their start and learn from me, but they got enough. They had enough of their own thing going on that when it was time to get out of the nest, they went and made it happen, and proud about them and proud for them. Have a good, friendly relationship with all of them, as I would hope. Of those 4 people, of all the people that had interned, those 4 were the most independently able to determine what the problem was and come up with a good solution with it, and keep me informed of what they were doing. So I wanted people, and this was hard to explain to people when they first came in, because I wanted them to act independently, but I couldn't allow them to act independently. I couldn't let them just have at it and send a client something, and find out about it later. You know what I mean? So,
Agreed.
So they needed to express their own opinions, but know that they were working, in support, in a support role. But and honestly, without sounding too egotistical, as the little you know me, but you probably know I don't toot my horn all that loudly.
Yep.
I found that I could really just think back to how I presented myself as an intern when I interned in 1983 was when I started. So it was just with a lot of enthusiasm, always on, always listening. And always ready to, always trying to connect the dots. Like, why was this person saying that to that other person, and what was this person's role? And I just found myself just incredibly curious about the whole process, and honestly didn't really think about what my job was going to be. I was like, how can I solve a problem? When they brought me on as a full-time assistant at Masterdisk in '84, after I graduated from my audio program. Doug Levine literally said to me, "We've never had an assistant engineer. We don't even know what an assistant mastering engineer is supposed to do, but we'll give you 3 months and we'll see what happens." Mm-hmm. And so that was the perfect challenge for me. It's like, because I kind of just felt like I was good at assisting people. I could sort of read what was going on. If it was working with my father on cars, or was working with the other place. My summer jobs was working in the apple orchard, and there we ran the irrigation pipe, and we worked in the trees and all sorts of things. But I was always able to figure out what the boss was trying to do, what I needed to do next, and how I could and just find some way to make it a little bit easier, a little bit more fluent, and help them work a little bit better. And so that's the skill. Which I thought, because that's the way I worked, I thought everybody had that. A friend of mine, colleague, business associate of mine, really sat me down one day and said, "The reason you're having these problems with people is you're expecting them all to be like you."
Yeah.
And so they explained to me that I had to put certain people in certain roles, and other people that had these attributes could be assistants and could really do well at it. And so that's I'm happy to say that two people that have come on board with me since moving out here, one's just been promoted from assistant into the cutting room. He's a full-time disc cutter, Brendan, and another recent hire who came in on as an intern has taken the the assistant role, the full-time assistant role for me. And they both got that. They're able to, without me even saying anything, look around and see what kind of needs to be done. They one of the things you have to watch out for, though, is sometimes these people don't know how to go home. It's like,
Yeah.
I have to remember, when it gets to be 7 or 8 o'clock, I'm like, oh, is he still in there? Oh, he's waiting for my permission to go home.
Yeah, you touch on some excellent points. One of them is well, first of all, you're right. One of the biggest mistakes we all make, me included, is that we sometimes fall into the trap of thinking that everyone thinks like us, and they don't. And so I think with younger guys, that's where we need to step up and just become the example to them to follow our lead. But also there's in my experience, I'm sure it's been yours too, Scott, that the guys who become the guns and the future, the future heavyweights often possess the stuff that you can't necessarily teach. You can encourage them, and that's the initiative, the ability to observe. I never went through any formal interning, but I spent a lot of time in New York. Obviously I came and I visited you, and I made frequent trips to the 90s, and I was so fortunate that I got to have contact with amazing engineers who would allow me to sit on their sessions and give me great lessons in the studio and show me studio etiquette. Just watch how they would run their sessions and how they would interact with clients, and the idea of how it was drilled very early into me that this was a service industry, and it was about client relationships and management of people and psychology, et cetera, et cetera. And again, stuff that's learning theory at school is great, and I think it's fantastic that in the last 20 years we've had an industry of audio. Some people have different opinions about it for whatever reason, and that's fine. I think obviously there's a demand. There has been a demand for people that want to learn how to run the thing. Personally, I love the idea. Maybe I'm a little old-fashioned. Just get in there, roll your sleeves up, watch, observe, like the old master apprentice model. But
that's a lot of big nod on that one. It's kind of an old-fashioned learn, and I think that's where one of the disconnects with current model of student is they don't get much access to that unless they've had a job, summer jobs, or out of school work, working in a shop, learning a craft. They don't, everything's sort of handed to them. And I don't mean that in the way that you hear people say, your kids have it easy, everything's handed to you. I mean, even if you're working hard, the stuff you're learning is in a textbook and it's all played out. The system to teach you how to do this is all there. You just have to follow the system. But that doesn't teach you the craft, and that doesn't help you to establish how you're going to fit into this world. What's going to make you interesting and different from other people and things. That's and some people really have trouble watching you do stuff and being able to be unintrusive, like be in the room while the creative thing is happening, and not it's a really tricky fine line, super fine line between being 100% attentive and in the way. And you need to be, if you can have one foot on either side of that and be, always be like super attentive, but never kind of let everyone, make it so the people in the room don't really notice that you're there, unless they want you to be noticed.
Yeah.
And I, for some reason I had that, and I felt like that I just could do that. But I've seen a bunch of people that are actually pretty good and have the skills to do what we do, but they have to kind of bypass the assistant stage because they really need to be the center of attention in the room. And that will serve them really well, a year or two from now. But when they're trying to be an assistant, that really gets in the way.
Yeah. Oh, this is all great advice, and this is gold right here, Scott. So honestly, this is absolutely
a lot of experience. doing it, and probably 5 times in my career, I've just kind of gotten exasperated and like said to myself, no more interns. I can't handle it. It's too much overhead. We're having too many problems and stuff. And then like it's almost like on cue, the next person through the door is insanely great. And so and so we keep doing it.
No, well, I so appreciate hearing. I mean, it's good for me to hear from you as to how to do it. I see a lot of parallel and overlap, but I think as I said to you, before we started, we hit record. I said, a big part of this podcast is to obviously it's self-indulgent for me because I just enjoy talking about mastering the history, with my brethren, but. Also, I love to hear about people's, their journey and how they overcome adversity, but also to provide good, practical, and pragmatic things for kids of today who are coming in the current era, in the current climate, that are still relevant, that still work. And even though we don't have that typical or the old-fashioned master-apprentice model, still a lot of the things, a lot of the virtues and qualities that you speak about will still hold people in good stead if they do want to. I tell people the best way to get your foot in the door is to build your own door and put your own foot through it, and become your own freelancer. But still to have someone there behind you that you could be mentored from distance or up close. So to be that person that you say, and to have those qualities of being able to sit in the room, be the ghost, but also know that just intuitively by observation, seeing what's going on, noticing the patterns, just really taking everything on board, just to take everything on board, and then be able to make and sometimes you have to take a risk, open your mouth or put your hand up, but even that can be rewarded as well, because it just shows you have initiative, and that gets rewarded with you being invited back, and you never know.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, sometimes something may come up and you think, you know what, I want to take you on board, and that's what happened with my recent protege, John Clayton. He came and got mentored by me for a while. I like the cut of his jib. I loved his attitude. I love the fact he had balance. Before you were talking about people staying back till, we were told sometimes as youngsters, be the first to come and the last to leave. But John's has got kids, and I love the fact that John comes in, he does his business during the day, he goes home, he has dinner with his family, he has some balance in his life. He doesn't allow the impact of work to him. I don't think you can ever have perfect balance, but there is
Right.
there is impact, and he won't allow the family to impact too much on his work, and vice versa. And it's always a bit of a dance. But I love the fact he'll go home and see his kids, and then if he has to come back, he'll come back, and he won't be here 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning. I mean, unless you're running a 24-hour operation, I don't think you need to be doing 14, 15-hour days. I really don't.
Yeah. A couple thoughts there. I've seen by example, as I'm sure you have, that if you give everything at the office or at the studio, it has impact, big impact on your life and the people around you, the people that you care for. And I think the translation to that, it's really hard to explain that to a person in their 20s, because they haven't lived it yet. But I've noticed that, while mastering leads to a pretty good balance in itself compared to other types of pro audio work. You generally have routine hours, and we generally have weekends off if you want them, and things like that. I kind of informally, well, let me just go out and say it. There have been times when I've had strings of major label work, and to keep that work coming in the door, to keep those people happy, you had to kind of sell your soul in a way. You had to sell your personal life in a certain way that I wasn't willing to do, or that I got to a point in my career at some point that I was no longer willing to do. And I remember a particular moment where I'm having that kind of awakening, that kind of a putting my foot down moment with my manager at the time. And it was being told, like, look, you got to do this. I promised this was going to be done. It's got to be done before, they're going to get it before we're never going to work with them again. And I was like, it doesn't matter. I've got a daughter at home. I've got somebody else who I've told I was going to be there, and that promise means more to me than the promise of being a superstar. If that's what I'd have to give up to be it, and quite frankly, I know it's just a routine. It's a kind of an abuse of our the fact that we love what we do and we put so much of ourselves into it. I think it gets kind of abused when people start um, um, expecting you to, stay for hours and days at a time and forego important family, events just
Mm.
to keep them on a pedestal and keep their ego stroked and things like that. So I guess the translation of this is down to at the student level or at the apprentice level is be careful what you wish for, because you can have a steady thing working with independent and midline kind of projects, but when you do make that break up into the top tier, you've got to you got to be careful about setting the boundaries,
Yeah.
because
I,
it'll eat you up.
I'm a great believer in the saying, which I said for a long time, and I tell kids, we teach people how to treat us, and a lot of time, a lot of fear gets put into engineers of, oh, well, this is the opportunity of a lifetime, and if you don't do this, as you alluded to before,
Yeah.
you'll never get to work with them again, and often that's that's just scare tactics. Look, I can tell you now, of the work that I do, Scott, I would say 5% is even generous of the work that I do, 5%. And I'm being quite generous. I think I'm being pretty generous with that, just to round it up to a figure. And it's not that I don't care to, I don't want to work with majors, but in my experience, when it came to timelines, most of the deadlines were really not as, as urgent as they made them out to be. It was always about, the A&R guy wanting to have something for his boss. It was more about their career rather than the artist as such. Do you know what I mean? In the
Yeah.
majority of cases, and like yourself, after a while, I got a little sick of that, and not because I was necessarily the great family man or anything like that back then, but I just realized, you know what, I'm just sick and tired of being a doormat. And I'm just going to work with these guys over here who will value me, who when I say no, they respect that, and it's just a much more comfortable and more fun way of working. So I'm with you on that.
Yeah. Yeah. I agree. The kind of related to that as a we use the word young or apprentice engineer or what junior engineer, whatever. We go just kind of mean the person who's establishing themselves in their own room or help or apprenticing with somebody to help to learn and get more experience. Um, it's um, another a point that you got to be careful with is if a major portion of your work is coming from one source. And this is just, this is good business. Has nothing to do with mastering per se. But if I saw at least one senior engineer who was doing particularly great work, but was, principally working with one major. And when that work went away, when that particular NR person was no longer at that label, it was like trying to catch sand in your fingertips. It just, you just felt like his career was falling apart, and it had absolutely nothing to do with anything he did, other than that he wasn't diverse enough.
Yeah.
And so in hindsight, if he had taken a few more of those indie records and taken on a few more of the up and coming producers to go along with his hit records, but at the time you're doing it, you don't ever, it doesn't ever feel like it's going to go away. You've got more work than you can possibly do. So why would you ever worry about it not being there? But if it's all coming from one source, if you get one big check, every couple months from one source, you really have to look out. You have to prepare for that event when that check's not going to be there, because it really is going to come. That's they change their minds, somebody gets fired, the label divests itself of a particular style of music, or any of 100 other reasons.
Yeah, no, absolutely. That happened to me in the late 90s. There was a distribution company where 90% of my income came from them, and I'm thinking, okay, I'm going to ride this wave, and just didn't really bother to seek other opportunities or look at other things because it was there, and I mistakenly thought, okay, well, this is like almost like a job for life, and it seemed that way until one day. But look, one of my friends who worked in the company said, look, the managing director has a friend. He's just starting up his own little mastering thing, and I believe that he's going to start, and so I got a bit of a heads up. Of course, I did not heed the warning, and seriously, man, it was like the work was coming in like a waterfall, and it didn't even gradually stop. It just stopped. Boom. And that's it. And I was there just carrying the can, and it took a long time to build things up. And the flip, not so much the flip side, but the other side of that, and particularly I noticed this in America, is that because the market is so big over there, people can. I mean, I'll give an example. Ted Jensen. All right. Ted Jensen for decades managed to hold himself down as the rock metal guy successfully for many, many years. And I'm sure that for Ted that would have been, great in some respects because it was regular work, regular billing. He was the man. He was the go-to guy. But I'm sure even for him it would have been very frustrating to feel that, guys, I can do more than just metal and heavy rock and what have you. I can do a classical, I can do a jazz, and I'm sure he could. And no doubt he's done a few in his career, but it would be frustrating also for someone to be able to sell themselves to an A&R guy because the perception is, well, you've had, half the Billboard chart of the rock is your stuff. We'll just send stuff for you because we know it. We know it's reliable. We know it's going to work. And we'll go to Howie for this, and we'll go to Bob. But I think to be diverse, and if you can be diverse, and sometimes things can be out of your hands because if you get a couple of hit records in a certain genre, you become the darling of the scene. But, guys like yourself and Bob Ludwig, for example, Steve Markison, just being able to be successful and, and have some hits in various different genres, but not necessarily be pigeonholed into one particular style and be able to sort of, swim in different kind of rivers.
Yeah, I don't know whether you can necessarily choose that. You can try to choose to be diverse, but it's I'm not. I guess people are you find out in hindsight what your pigeonhole is. I don't think you start out trying to be in one, but it's for the same thing. I've been disqualified from a project for not having enough depth in a particular subgenre, where in fact it really I know quite well, and even maybe the producer knows quite well that I do fine, but the people involved in the project need to have what they feel is like is a sure thing. A name that represents what they're going to expect. It's kind of always been like this. I mean, I remember back in the heyday in the 80s when we were in Manhattan and there was 4, 5, 6 different competing cutting studios in Manhattan when the independent mastering thing was really going strong. The labels all had their studios as well, but the independents we're charging more and we're getting the big projects, but there was a lot of competition. It was all very visible. I mean, you kind of knew when a project was being shot at between 2 or 3 different studios, and you'd find out because a messenger slip would come over with the tapes on it, and it had just been at Sterling, or it had just been at Frankfurt Wayne, or it's just coming from someplace else, or somebody at Atlantic had put their notes in the box, and it was. I don't know whether at this point I'm just being nostalgic because it's but it seems a little harder to compete when or a little harder to connect directly with the people when a song gets sent out to 15 different places and everybody provides a mastering sample, and then the committee sits around and picks which one they want, and it's not an environment. It's not a method that I think works well for me. And I've actually over the past few years chosen to not participate in the free samples, even though I know it's a great way for people to hear my work. It's a really terrible way for them to get to know who I am.
Yeah, I think in this day and age with the internet, with so much connection and ability to look into people's backgrounds, and especially when you have a big discography, at the end of the day, I tell clients, you may like the sound of this record or that record, but I'm working on your record, and any engineer will be working with your record. So, we're interested in creating your sound. That's going to be your thing. And look, I understand some people want a certain name on the sleeve because it might be the one and only chance. And everyone's got the right to do that. But I think as far as shootouts go, look, I'm certainly nowhere, in the world mastering ecosystem. I'm certainly not, I'm not one of the top guys, and I'm completely fine with that. But for all the years that I have been mastering, I certainly don't feel that I want to participate in a shootout, not because of any fear of a lack of skill set, but again, because communication is such a big part of this business, and it's like, okay, let's have a listen to what you got. What is it that you take? It's all good to have the ability to foresee the vision, and I think that's a part of the job, to be able to facilitate that process to realize their vision. But sometimes it's okay to sit down and an artist to sort of say, listen, this is kind of what we're looking for. And look, by the time the mix gets to you, Scott, as you'd agree, I'm sure you'd agree with me, most of the work is done. We're not trying to repaint a picture. We're just trying to frame it and give it its best presentation. So there's only so much that we can add to it at that point. So, so when helping the client to, manage their expectations, but also to say, look, if the shootout thing is like, the way I approach it now is, all right, if you want me to get involved in this, I'll do it, but you're going to pay me for it. Now, if you decide you want to use it, that's great. But if not, that's fine. I value my time. I value my skill set, and that's it. So, sorry, mate, I really interrupted. You were about to say something. Just
No. I agree with all of that, and it's exactly the same way I put it. I think it's a style, or it's a technique that's seems to be more suited for a person that is trying to build a portfolio, and even the practice is worth it. For me, practicing on another song means that's one more song's worth of my ears being used. And it's one more hour, half an hour out of the day that I'm not breaking even in my financial picture. Sure, the lure is to to be able to sell and get the next project, but it's I just encourage people to try to connect with the people mixing and mastering with them. Try to connect with them on a better level, on a higher level, on a more well. After someone sent me a preliminary mix, and I give them an evaluation, maybe a critique of their mix, or suggestions on how to make it better prior to mastering, now they're learning something about me and learning about how I listened into their song. I mean, I often get told that, wow, great points. We'd listened to the thing 40 times. We didn't even notice that the third chorus, second vocal was louder. And I pointed out, it's like, yeah, it's really obvious, but it's something they'd missed. So now I've explained, I've literally proven to them how deep and how into their music that I am, and I think that goes a long way into helping justify the cost and helping justify the purpose of independent mastering. Because we're even at a point these days we're trying to justify our skill set as an independent part of the music making process. And, I'm really reluctant to blame it on the new technology and blame it on the kids, or blame it on the thing. It's I saw this happen. We've all seen this happen in other types of crafts where a prosumer has taken over a big chunk of the pro market. Film, the fact that we have 4K cameras on our person at all times, has definitely affected a videographer's role and purpose in life. So
but it also brings. Sorry, mate. Go on.
Going to what it gives everybody an opportunity, and that's why I was going to wrap it up. Is that it really does.
You took exactly what I was going to say. Yeah, I think it's wonderful that everyone now has an opportunity, because if someone is great at being able to create or help people, co-create something, in the past people were held back because of lack of money or what have you. Yes, of course, it brings more noise into the mix, but I prefer to see the glasses half full rather, in this particular scenario. And I really like what you said before about the idea of how you, and it's more and more common these days. But I remember in 1991 when I started my own thing back here in Melbourne, and and there was more. The whole prosumer thing was starting. The recording, the bigger recording studios were slowly starting to wind down. And what would happen quite often to me is, you book a session, people would come to, what was at the time the bedroom in my 2-bedroom flat, and we'd throw up, they'd bring a DAT tape and we'd have a listen, and half the time the mixes weren't all that great, and it became very frustrating that you'd want to book a session in the hope that you complete the project and have the client go off in their merry way. And we couldn't because, one song out of 10 wasn't right. So, Phil, I don't know if you probably know Lack of Channel in Toronto, but George Graves was a bit of a hero of mine, and a great mentor as well. And they had a thing called the pep talk. I forget exactly what PEP standard for, but the whole idea was they realized that a lot of people were working from home and they were still getting new to the craft. So in order to mitigate these times of sessions being disjointed, they'd invite them in, sit down, listen to what they had, provide a constructive input on the project, on the things that were not going to help them, allow the client to get the most value out of the mastering process. And then they go back. And as you said, it was a chance for them to get to know you as a person. It was a way of demonstrating that you actually gave a genuine shit and fuck about what was going about them and about their music, that you were invested in the process. And so it became this relationship and a team. And so, and also allowed the client to go home, who was the engineer and the producer, to understand their room and their monitoring and how in future they would, what compensation they'd have to make, which then would allow them to make a better mix, which allow you to make a better master, and so on and so on. So that was an excellent point that you brought before. I just wanted to expand on that. It gives value, but people get to know you as a person, as an engineer, and between you make much better records, and it's a much more fun process of doing as well.
It really is. So I've taken some people really far down the road, come in with a really an amateur mix on off of a pretty good recording, and really walk them down the road to a much better thinking about how to put their record together by just giving them some ideas, some options. I had another thought, it just escaped me, but I'll come back to it. But it's that's what it was. As it turns out, that's actually what I think is probably the best use of my experience is in that role, because anybody can take these days. It's easy to overmaster or over EQ and over process, but if you've got that sorted out, then you can take a pretty good mix and do a little tidying up on it and make it a little bit better, and that's not particularly hard. But looking into a murky soup of a poorly constructed mix and bad engineering practices and skills, and trying to imagine how you can wrestle a song out of that kind of keeps it interesting for me.
Yeah. Did you ever do much, like, back in the day, or ever dabble with mixing yourself as an engineer?
But back early on, and then at different times, I've kind of always had a writing studio in the background. That's not really a commercial space, but a place where I go to play and record and produce a few projects a year. In my current work situation here, I actually have a a large live room next to our mastering operation. I've got another partner in that space, so he keeps it busy part of the time. But it's available for me to just work on a pet project when it comes along. And we do dabble a little bit in live to 2-track and direct to disc, because we do the disc recording, disc cutting here. So as cool and as absolutely, old school as direct to disc is, and it's all great, but it's nearly impossible to make money doing it. It's sort of like making money with a yacht. It's like you're just spending money as fast as you possibly can. There's no way to sell seats for enough to keep up with it. But a few choice projects have come through, and I'm hoping there'll be more of that. But it's I like to keep my ear fresh, and I think that's one way of doing it. Not putting my ears next to drum kits and large guitar amps all that often, but it's I like to be in a room with musicians playing live together and communicating, and that's kind of like the best of show for me. And so we've tapped into some local talent, and may have something by the end of the year, have something to talk about along that regard. So some personally produced and curated, records, out of the studio here. So it's one of the things that keeps me distracted.
I think it's good to have a passion project, and I can't even mix a drink. I can hear what doesn't quite work or what doesn't sit right. I can't get into the minutiae of it all, but I can give you a broad oversense. But I like the idea of doing a passion project too. I think it's great to allocate a little time, and whether it's for me personally, it's more about working with young kids and bands who their mum and dad would foot the bill, and every now and again it's nice to when you have the disposable time and the energy to be able to contribute towards that. And I know you do that kind of thing, and I think it's important that us older cats, man, that we show a little generosity, and we give a little time, and like you said before, you're not a guy who toots his own trumpet, but you're a guy that's active on the forums. You always provide great input to people. You're very articulate in the way you respond, and I think that's appreciated, man.
Well, I appreciate it. I thank you, and I'll say my advice to the younger crowd along those lines is I delete about 3 out of every 4 posts that I'm about to post, and it's like right before I hit send, I read the thing back again. It's like, you know what? I really don't need to say this. I really don't need to, But the ones I do post have a lot of, have a little more thought in them, and I feel it's an important thing to say. Just like maybe I have a slightly different point of view or something, but it's gotten comical now, because I'll be going through the posts and getting ready to say something. Yeah, I got something to say. I'm like, no, just don't.
Well, if there's one person that was guilty of just being a head kicker and went in just all in, it was me back in the old Gear Sluts days, and until and it was. And I had a couple of sparring partners. Well, I don't need to name, but I got nothing but love in my heart for them today, as a more mellow individual. But even today, I find myself there's enough people out there that are more technical, dare I say, even more credentialed than me to put things out there. And not to say that what I've got to say is irrelevant, but what I've done for myself now, Scott, is like looking to find for the gaps, and that is there are so many great engineers to provide the how do you get it louder, or what attack time setting, or what kind of chain, or what kind of and my thing more is about mindset, about attitude, about encouraging the young kids, and about sharing my story, and being okay, particularly with sharing the quote unquote failings or shortcomings or mistakes of my career, so that they don't repeat the same ones. And same with this podcast, man. It's this podcast has been today. It's like exactly the sort of thing that I hope to have, an interesting and engaging conversation with someone of like mind, who is honest and upfront, and can bring well considered input that not only can be of interest to other engineers who are mid-level or more experienced, but also to the youngsters out there who are my passion. They're the kids I want to see do well, because they are the next wave. And so, as I move on and evolve and change, this is part of this podcast is built on, mate. Is how do we serve the youngsters, and how can I bring on board guys like yourself who are experienced purely as a self-indulgent exercise, just to engage, but also to share some wisdom and knowledge to those who are open to the suggestions. And so online, it's the same thing. It's like I'm hoping where do I find the gap, and where do I feel I can actually bring some value in a different kind of way, and as well as a little bit of amusement to some of the others as well, and hopefully as a bit of a bonus, and we move on from there and have a happy day.
Yeah. Hey, can I put a little plug in for my podcast? It's
yes.
Different,
yeah, please.
A little bit different, but I haven't been too regular about posting them. They kind of come out in spurts, but that's just so as it is. But it's called Making Vinyl at Masterdisk, and it's myself with either other people involved in making records, or I have a kind of a stand-in side fellow, KJ's, who's in the band, a new band called The Odyssey. But we just talk about anything that has to do with the old analog formats and vinyl, and we just did one couple days ago, all about the audio cassette, the resurgence now of the compact cassette, and how vital it is to some people, and how almost silly it seems to others, but that's all really cool. But so that's Making Vinyl Masterdisk, and it's somebody told me I should do it, and I started doing it thinking like, I don't know, but then I've gotten some good feedback, so we keep doing it.
Well, thank you for me, and we'll plug it. And again, here it is. I mean, it's so cool. It's you bring a different element and different aspect to it, and whether it's from nostalgia read, but even I think a lot of young kids that they obviously vinyl having been really strong for a while, and looks like it'll continue to be, and cassettes. I mean, I've known kids who mastered stuff for cassette, and I used to like. Oh, cassettes were cool, man. Remember when we used to make our own mixtapes? We just I mean, now it's kind of like it's technology, what it is, and that's great too. But part of the fun was the just deciding what am I going to use, and then the process of playing it and setting your levels on the cassette, and then just the joy of being in your car and making your own analog Spotify playlist. It's cool.
I swear I'm a mastering engineer because I had a cassette deck at home, and as I record off the radio. But then once we got a second cassette deck, I was I could really put an assembly together, and I was taught myself real basic editing stuff, not with a splicing block, but with going tape to tape. And I don't know. I'm sure it has a lot to do with why this ended up being what I devoted my life to.
Oh, it's fantastic. Scott, we're going to have to wind it up here, but it's been an honor, man. Thank you so much. Really appreciate your time and your input, and all the stuff that you shared with us today. It's been a phenomenal chat. I've enjoyed myself immensely. I sincerely wish you and Masterdisk and your crew just good fortune and good luck and continued success as you carry on. And I hope that at some point later this year, I'd love to have you back on, because it's these kind of conversations that I live for and I enjoy. And I'd love to sit and talk for more. But I've got Madam Dempsey. He's going to bring the SWAT team in a minute, and blow up the door to get in. So I better let him in here, and so we can all make some scratch. But mate, thank you so much.
Yeah. You're very welcome. My pleasure. And it's always a pleasure, and be happy to join you again. And all the best to yours as well. Stay safe.
Thanks a lot. Back at you. Thanks so much, Scott. All the best to you, man. All right, thank you. So there you go. Scott Hull, Masterdisk in New York, joining us today for the podcast, first one for 2020. So much fun. Thank you so much for everyone that who have gone, liked, and subscribed to the Mastering Music, Mastering Life YouTube channel. And thanks again to George Soteropoulos at Omega MMA, Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, kickboxing, grappling, wrestling, any kind of your self-defense martial arts down in Collingwood. Go check him out. It's a great place to train. George, being a former UFC man, in the lightweight division. He's definitely not a lightweight. he's a great guy. He's a great teacher. And so if you want to come down just for, any basic kind of fitness, or you want to, you want to become, quite skilled in any kind of the martial arts that are taught down there, go check him out. 6 Down Street in Collingwood, Omega MMA. All right, I'm out of here. Thanks very much, everyone. As always, say, please be nice to each other. But more importantly, be nice to yourselves. I love you fuckers. We'll catch you on the next one. See ya.